I welcome you all students of Standard 7 back to my online class. Students, in my former video, I have already explained up to the point where Swami appealed to the mother, looked at her with his appealing eyes for some help. The mother responded, no doubt. She suggested her husband to let him sleep in the hall instead of taking him to his office room. But Swami's father didn't pay any attention to what was the advice of his wife, and afterwards we have to see what comes next in the next page. Swami also wanted the same, that he should be allowed to sleep in the hall. But father didn't agree. The result was that Swami had to slink behind him with bowed head. Swami had put up a plea that there could be some scorpions in his office, in his or behind his law books, but the father didn't listen anything. He simply wanted Swami to be fearless. He wanted him to be strong enough against the darkness, against any kind of shadow. He went on affirming his point that it was simply a question of habit, and cultivation of good habits was very necessary. Ultimately, Swami asked him if he would leave the door of the office room open. The father still had some doubt about his son's rolling up of his bed and going back to Granite side at night. For that reason, he warned him that if he did anything like that, he would make him an object of laughter in his school. Swami found himself to be totally distanced from humanity. He was very much hurt. He had some disagreements and anger also against his father. He didn't like the carelessness, the hardness of his father to him. He even didn't have any good respect for that boy of the story, tiger's story, who had fought the tiger. He rather wished that it had been better if the child would have been killed by the tiger then he won't have any this type of proposition from his father to sleep in his office. Ultimately, he had to follow the command of his father because he was well aware of the firmness of his father. But as the night advanced and the silence got intenser in the office room, his heart started beating very faster, as if his heart was being hammered. He had many very bad stories in his mind, and they all started to come in front of him in his mind. He remembered his close friend Mani, who had seen the devil in the banyan tree. He remembered Muni Swami's father, who had been slapped by the devil on his cheek when he was returning home late one night. He got so much fearful that it seemed that he would lose his consciousness, he would become senseless. He heard some sounds in the stillness of the dark. He had some sounds of ticking of the clock in his ears, rustling of trees, snoring sounds, and some other humming sounds of the insects which go on moving about at night. He covered himself very closely and compactly with his sheet, bed with his shawl, but covering of his body could not dispel the darkness nor the devil from his mind. And for that reason, every moment it seemed to him that some devil was about to come and then pull him out from the place and to take him to some other place where the devil would tear him into pieces. He remembered one more example of one of his acquaintances. He had been carried away from his home, and then he had been taken to Siam or Nepal. Just as he remembered that friend who had been taken to far off any other country, he sweated profusely. All on a sudden, he got up and then took his bed under the bench and then put himself under it. It seemed to him that sleeping under the bench would be a bit comfortable for him. Moreover, he tried to shut his eyes very tightly, covering himself compactly with the shawl or whatever the cover he had with himself. But despite his all efforts to put all the evil thoughts away from his mind, the bad imaginings, the bad dreams continued to obsess his complete whole existence. In one of the nightmares, in one of his bad dreams, he looked that he was being chased by a tiger. When he was needing the help of his feet the most, his feet stuck to the ground. Even if he tried his best to pull out his leg to run away from the approaching death, from the approaching tiger, he couldn't move even an inch to his feet from the place. The tiger was close and he was unable to do anything for himself. The tiger was making the sounds of his scratching. It went on scratching, but Swami was unable to do anything to protect himself from that dangerous animal. Just then, Swami tried his hard to open his eyes. He groaned in his desperation, but there was no any respite from his fear. After some efforts, he managed to keep his hand out from his covering. He tried to feel whether the granny was present at his side, but then he realized his reality, that he was sleeping somewhere in the office room of his father instead of the usual bed in the passage where he slept with his granny. Just then, when he was sweating, perspiring for the excessiveness, for the extremity of fear, he heard some rustling sound. His injury had already been assaulted. By now, he had understood quite clearly that the devil would be very close after some time or after a few moments, and then he would be pulled out and torn into pieces. For that reason, since he had already seen a shadow, he made himself prepared that before he could be carried out and torn into pieces, he himself would do something to give the proper response to the devil. And that's what he really did. Just as the shadow crawled nearer, came nearer, he came out from under the bench and held the legs of that devil with all his strength and beat him with his teeth as if those teeth were not simply teeth, rather they were very powerful weapons. That man who had been beaten by Swami very fiercely, he cried out. He used the term Ayo. This is a term which is used in this locality in Jharkhand very much. When a person gets very much afraid, or when he is panicked or afraid, then he remembers the mother. Ayo means mother. That's what he sounded, as if he needed the help of his mother. This sound was so audible, it was so forceful that father heard it, and then he came there holding a light in his hand with his cook and a servant. They looked at the burglar. He was a very notorious burglar in that locality who was already being searched by the police for a long time, but the police had been a failure in their efforts. His ankle was bleeding because of the bite of Swami, and so it was easy to overpower him. He was alone, and these were four. Consequently, that burglar was caught very easily. When Swami next day went to his class, he was appreciated, he was congratulated by almost all, ranging from principal to his tiny small friends. His classmates were very much surprised to think that a very small boy like them could do such a risky work like catching a notorious burglar, getting him arrested by the police. The headmaster used the phrase a true scout for Swami, and even the police inspector who happened to visit Swami because of his bravery, he invited him to join the police force when he grew up. Swami didn't have much courage. This was a reality of his life. He was a fearing person, fearing child. But for the sake of politeness, he affirmed the invitation put forth by the inspector. Swami had other professions in his mind, like becoming an engine driver, a railway guard, or a bus conductor. But at least on this occasion, when the police wanted him to be a policeman, he gave his consent. Whatever might have been the appreciations for him, whether in school or at police station, but he knew his real stature, real condition. So just as his classes ended, he went back his home and went directly to the same place which was his usual resting place, on the bed which was being shared by his grandmother. When the father came back at night, he inquired where he was, and then the father was informed that he had already gone to bed. The father seemed to be again a bit hard to Swami, but the mother got angry at him. She almost reprimanded him, saying that Swami had not had a single wink of sleep for whole of the last night. But the father didn't have anything to do with the sleep of his son. He simply wanted to know the place where he had slept. And then the mother stated she informed about the place. She told him that he was sleeping on the bed of his granny. She didn't want that the life of Swami could be put to any danger. She didn't want the life of her son to be made risky. So she asked her husband not to disturb him and let him sleep wherever he liked. Swami's father got a bit stiffed, annoyed. Unwillingly, he said it was all right, that he must be kept away from the real experiences of life. But the mother didn't want to listen anything. She wanted the safety of her son. Swami was already listening the conversation from under the cover, under the blanket, and when he felt that father had already accepted his defeat, he felt very much relieved. This is what is the end of this story. Now, children, you have to be really a brave child. You must have all the heroic qualities. You must try to be gentle, amiable, friendly, helpful, and fearless, so that you can be of some help to your family, to your friends, to your nation, and even you may go above that place for some kind of help to this world community as a whole. With this expectation, I want you to wait for my next video, when again we will discuss the question answers, or will take up any other chapter or any unit. Bye for the time to come for the next video.